Michael Hearns, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Patrick. Thanks for having me.
Hey, let's start at the beginning. Where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Miami, Florida. People think of Miami, Florida as being one large city. It actually sits in Miami-Dade County, which is comprised of like 26 or 28 different municipalities. It could be Miami Beach, Coral Gables, Hialeah, um, Miami Shores. The little town I grew up in was actually called Miami Springs. It's out by Miami International Airport. But yeah, I grew up in Miami proper.
Okay, so you're growing up. What kind of neighborhood did you grow up in? What were your like pals doing?
Oh man, I grew up in a bygone era. I mean, I grew up on a street that had, I don't know, I forget, 9 to 11 young men, all in my age group on there, some older, some younger, and we were all very athletic and very industrious and very mischievous. And we had, we built forts and we made rafts and we went across the canal and we played sports in the street and everybody was just, it was like kind of like a Lord of the Flies, but a more genteel version, I guess.
Okay. Now you grew up by the airport, correct?
I did. I did. I grew up very, very close to Miami International Airport. You could see and hear them working on airplanes, going to the blast fence and stuff like that when I was a kid. Yeah, very close to the airport.
Okay. So you're growing up there, you go to high school. Where did you go to college?
I went to college at Southern Connecticut State University, which is in New Haven, Connecticut. I was not from New England. I was not from Connecticut. I was fortunate enough that I had some very good soccer skills, and because of that, I ended up on the soccer team at Southern Connecticut State University, and that's where I went for my 4-year undergrad. And I did my master's in Vermont, but I did my undergrad in Connecticut. But eventually, I always came back to South Florida, back to Miami.
So what was your bachelor's in? What was your degree
Uh,
in?
Business economics with a minor in psychology.
Okay. And then did you go straight from there to getting your master's degree?
No, no, it was probably at least a 18 to 19-year gap in between
Oh,
that.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
got my master's towards the back end of my law enforcement career.
So what did you want to do when you grew up? You're going to college for that. Obviously you wound up in law enforcement, but was that your initial plan?
No, no, I actually, as a young man, I used to watch, TV like everybody, and I saw episodes of Bewitched, and I thought that Darren Stevens had the greatest job in the world because he got to go home and draw. I didn't realize that he was working, late at home on work, and that his whole livelihood depended on what he was doing in that back room with the drafting table. I thought that would be what I want to do is just like, create advertisement and ad content and be in the marketing and advertising field.
Gotcha. Plus you had a hot wife. I mean, you can't discount that.
Well, yeah, but that's no good if you're locked in your room working on stuff and not interacting with the family. Yeah.
That's very true. Now, you graduated from college. What was your first job out of college?
First job out of college, first real job out of college was I worked in the marketing department for a small airline that flew to Florida and to the Bahamas.
Oh,
And I was there for like maybe a week and a half. And the director of marketing quit. And they came in and said, "You are now our director of marketing." And at the age of like 22, I was director of marketing for an international airline. I was truthfully at the time the youngest airline executive in the country.
wow.
And we flew all over the Bahamas and we flew in Florida. We flew um, Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Key West, um, Tampa. But most of our flights were to the Bahamas. So I was back and forth to the Bahamas a lot.
So any other jobs in aviation?
Yeah, I ended up working for Providence Boston Airways, Airlines, but the biggest one I worked for was Eastern Airlines. I worked with them for a while and I worked in marketing with them. And then as they started to go through deregulation and they started to go into changes in the aviation industry, I needed and wanted a recession-proof job. And it wasn't that I always wanted to be in law enforcement. It's just that it seemed to me like it was going to be a stable paycheck. And
Gotcha.
it was more of a falling into it and a calling and a tripping into it at the same time.
Okay, yeah. I worked for Delta for a summer throwing bags.
Oh
So
yeah,
that was,
working on the ramp. Yeah.
yep, yep.
Well, my second book, which is my titles are behind me here. My second book, Grasp and Smoke, actually has a aviation ramp component in there. You might
Oh, it
enjoy that.
does.
Yeah, it does.
I'm gonna have to check that out for sure.
Yeah,
I
cool.
had a lot of fun. I mean, it was good manual labor, but I worked with a lot of interesting people. I mean, whenever you work, like a Joe job like that, you meet all kinds of folks. And I really enjoyed it. It was hot, it was like over 100 degrees on the tarmac in the summer. But the only problem was they wanted me to go back in the winter, and I'm like, no, 20 degrees below zero at 4 o'clock in the morning. That I'm too old for that. That ain't gonna happen. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, the skin of the aircraft is still very, very cold from its
Oh,
descent, and then
right.
you're in a cold environment. If you don't touch that, if you touch the airplane with unprotected skin or something wet, you're gonna be in trouble.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. So, did you have any family members in law enforcement?
My father was in law enforcement. He was a chief of police in a small municipality in Miami-Dade County. My uncle was NYPD. My cousin was NYPD. And I'm on my second marriage with my amazing wife, and her father was actually assistant chief of police of the city of Miami. So it seems like there's a synergy,
Yeah.
connectivity here, and it's all worked out fairly well.
So seeing people in uniforms and guns and all that is just kind of like second nature to you, I would imagine, if you grew up with it.
Yeah, it was second nature, but it was also like I remember on my street at one time we had, I think, two or three police officers and a U.S. Marshal living on our street. And we were
Wow.
still hellions. We didn't care. We still, ran through yards and threw lemons at cars and did all kinds of stuff. But yeah, so law enforcement was kind of prevalent in South Florida. There they were obviously out there. You saw the cars, you saw the officers, and then through the family interaction, you would see them too as well.
Right. So you got bit by the law enforcement bug. What was your first job in law enforcement?
Well, my first job, like everybody, I went to the police academy, and then I came out of the police academy, and I did a little bit of time on the road, and then I did street narcotics with the city of Miami, and then I did back to the road again, and then after about 8 months of being on the road, I ended up in Vice Narcotics, um,
Okay.
the venue Vice Intelligence Narcotics. If you remember the TV show Miami Vice,
Oh yeah.
we were the real Miami Vice. I did that for 10 years and then was on the road supervising for a number of years after that. And it ended up my career in in doing grants and intelligence.
Okay. So as far as where you started out, what police department hired you? Who did you work for?
Okay, yeah, yeah. I got hired by the city of Coral Gables in Miami, Florida. I applied at the city of Miami, Coral Gables, and I took the Treasury Enforcement Agent test and was in the customs hiring pool, U.S. Customs, but I opted to go to Coral Gables.
Okay. Yeah, Florida's a little bit different as far as you have main police academies that, you go to that police academy and you're going to have classmates that are going to be working in all different municipalities, right?
Right. Yeah, you're all wearing the same looking academy uniform. It's just that your shoulder patch will be with the city you work for. So you'll be sitting here talking to someone, and their shoulder patch will say South Miami. The guy across from you will be Miami. The lady across from you will be Ball Harbor, and you
Okay.
had your own patch. Yeah.
So Coral Gables, you get hired by them, you go through the academy, you start field training. Just to give us a feel for it, how big of a city and how big of a department are we talking?
Well, when I got hired, it was about 170 person police department. City was about 46,000 in population.
Mm,
In the last 30 years, the city has grown vertically very, very much. So now the population is about 59,000. The department's about 260 now.
okay. Now, just to kind of give us an idea of the geography, Coral Gables, I imagine, you're up against other municipalities. There isn't a whole lot of like open area. And how close are you to like Miami and like
Well,
larger municipalities?
our eastern border is the city of Miami.
Okay.
Our northern border is primarily the city of Miami with a little bit of Miami-Dade County. Our west border is West Miami, South Miami, and then our southern border is the municipality newly formed about 20 years ago called Pinecrest. But
Okay.
we hug the bay, so we're the southern part of the Florida Peninsula that you see. We hug the bay. We have 40 miles of inland canals. We have our Marine Patrol covers all the way out into the Atlantic Ocean and back to Biscayne Bay. So
Okay. Now you were on the street for about a year. Like you said, you did field training, then you're on the street and patrol for about a year. Do you remember the first time going out without a field training officer? Like, hey, I'm on my own. Did you guys work in pairs? Did you have a partner, or what did that look
no,
like?
we did not work in pairs. I remember I was afternoon shift, and I didn't think too much about it. I just took the plunge. I think the biggest concern I had was to keep my ear tuned to the radio.
Right.
It's a real big no-no in our department to miss your radio call. They don't want the dispatcher raising you more than once or twice.
Sure.
So I think I was just focusing on the radio. And the city of Coral Gables is geographically kind of hard to learn your way around if you're not familiar with it.
Mm,
So I remember having a cognizant ongoing dialogue in my head of what street was I on and what block was I in. So I always knew where I was. Yeah.
yeah, I remember pulling out of the driveway, the district that I was in. I'm like, okay, this is real. Oh
Well, I'll
boy.
tell you, I tell you this now you just, jar the memory. I remember coming out of the police academy and one of my classmates and I there were four of us at the time, and two of us were off doing something and the other two were doing something else. And that day, myself and this newly sworn in classmate of mine were relegated to be inside the police department, seeing the ins and outs of the internal structure of the building, where papers go, what folders, what office,
Yeah.
what everything. So the guy goes to us, the sergeant in training or something, he goes, all right, you guys go to lunch, come back in an hour. So we get in the car to go to lunch and we're in full uniform, gun, badge, everything. And we realize we never even had field training yet. And we're going to lunch. And I remember him turning to me and going, "What would you do if something happens?" And I go, "You just do it, man. You
Yeah.
just do what you think." And I remember being in a restaurant, and the owner of the restaurant came over to our table and said some nice things to us. And in turn, I stupidly said, "Wow, that's really great." I go, "So how long have you been here?" And he looked at me and he goes, "9 years."
Yeah.
And he looked at me like with perplexed look, like, "How do you
Yeah.
know?" I have, and I said, "Yeah, we work down south. I never get up here." Just like
Yeah.
I just played it off, like, yeah, yeah,
Oh, that's funny. So you do a year on the street, but just like taking 911 calls, calls for service, that kind of thing. And then you were actually kind of plucked out to do some kind of undercover vice operations, correct?
yeah. Myself and two or three other officers, and then we had a really good sergeant too. We were kind of like a street crime suppression group, but also doing street narcotics with the city of Miami from time to time. So we were working closely with the city of Miami with ourselves and U.S. Customs Service Operation Greenback was looking for some capable department, capable people who could assist them with their anti-money laundering narcotic cases. So they came to us. We had already kind of established ourselves as a good group of people, and we started working with U.S. Customs, and then kind of had some really decent cash seizures rather quickly. And the department recognized that this could be something that we want to do more often. So we were literally all swept up into vice narcotics like overnight. So I
Now,
went from being street narcotics to vice intelligence narcotics, the vice unit overnight.
wow. So, you're truly undercover, like jeans, t-shirt, scruffy, hair, beard, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many wedding pictures I ruined or how many other photographs I ruined. I do remember when my children were younger, like going to PTA meetings and stuff like that and having other parents move their chairs away from me. And the woman who bought the house across the street from us when I was a much younger man relayed to me later on that she always they looked at so many houses they didn't keep track of what house was which.
Yeah.
So the house they ended up buying, which was across the street from me, they called it the mean house because she said she saw me and I looked so mean. So, yeah. So I got that going for me. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Listening to another podcast, our friends Steve Murphy and Morgan Wright over at Game of Crimes, that's the first time I heard you. You talked about you were actually pulled out of the academy to do like a little undercover thing. That's unheard of. Could you tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about that?
I think it's unheard of then, it's unheard of now.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
yeah, I don't think many people even knew or know about that. But yeah, I was in the police academy and I grew up with, being close to the airport, it's an egress to transportation. So the town they grew up in had a lot of people who were in the transportation business, many of them in aviation, mostly not in the land side, but also in the air side of things, the pilots and mechanics and things like that. And, some of these pilots that lived in my neighborhood growing up, they were Korea War or Vietnam War era
Mhm.
pilots, and they missed the adrenaline rush of flying in, a couple feet above the water and having the ocean spray on their windshield. They didn't care if it was, you know, women's shoes from Santo Domingo or, ganja from Jamaica. So, I had a working understanding of the drug trade, and there were people in my community who were money launderers, arms traffickers, cocaine traffickers. Now, I do not want you to think for a second I lived in some nefarious, crazy, bad area. It was wonderful. It's
Yeah,
just that there was an undertone, and you kind of knew people who did stuff on the side. And you still saw them at the church carnival. You still saw them, at the in line at the bakery. You still saw them, at the red light at the intersection. But aside from the life they were living, we all kind of knew what they were doing on the side. So I had to work and understand it. And when I was in the police academy, some guy came up to me in a bar, and he was in the drug trade, and he asked me if he had heard I'd become a cop, and I wasn't going to deny it. That's just stupid. I've known this guy my whole life.
right.
And I said, yeah. And he said, hey, I know somebody who, I was at a party in Ecuador, and some guy who was on the FBI's top 10 list. I think his name was, I think it's Ricardo Rico Rey. I'm not sure what his actual name was now, but he's like, I know where he is. He's in Quito, Ecuador. And so I went back and mentioned to my training advisors at the police academy. And next thing I know, I was a day and a half later at nighttime meeting this guy in a bar restaurant in Miami on the water, getting some information to relay back to the feds.
Wow,
So
that's exciting for somebody who hasn't even graduated yet.
yeah, I mean, it was and it is, but it was South Florida, and it's hard for people who are not living there to understand the headiness of it all.
Hmm.
I had an academy classmate who knew a lot of drug runners down in Puerto Rico when he lived there for a while. I mean, we all kind of had a working knowledge because we were all South Florida kids, and it was a dominant aspect of our society back then, from the cigarette boats to the airdrops
Sure.
to the flashy bars and clubs and things. We were all exposed to that. We weren't young kids. We were all in our early 20s, so we'd all experienced the life before we got into police academy.
Gotcha. Now, did they have you wearing a wire?
No, no, I just sat
Oh,
down at a waterside bar and talked to the guy for a little bit, and that was it. It wasn't a matter of indicting or implicating him. He was just going to tell me
oh, okay. So it was just,
information. Yeah.
mm,
But he wasn't going to tell it to somebody else. So, and he wasn't a dummy. He knew, but he knew by telling me it was going to go back. He
okay.
had an ulterior motive. It wasn't like he was bringing me into his confidence. He was basically he realized I was a conduit and a tool
Right.
to get this guy, and he probably didn't want the guy out there himself.
Sure. Now, going back to, they plucked you from patrol after only about a year. I mean, you and I both know it takes about 4 years, sometimes 5 years to really get your feet wet and learn the job where you're super comfortable taking almost any assignment. But that's almost unheard of to be taking somebody that green or that rookie to be doing that kind of work. I mean, what did that look like for you and how did you feel about that?
Well, I mean, I agree with what you just said, but the reality of it was that we weren't and I even had a partner who had come on to the agency a little bit after me, who was also pulled with me.
Wow.
We weren't um, at that moment invested in understanding the elements of burglary and how to file a case for a trespass or ex parte order or something. We were being geared, channeled, positioned for undercover narcotics. And our youthfulness, I think, worked in our favor because I give you an analogy. My brother's a golfer, and I don't golf. But when I do, he spends good 2.5 minutes teeing up, getting his shoulders right, his hips right, his head right.
Yeah.
And I'm like Happy Gilmore. I just hit
Yeah,
it.
you and me both. Yeah.
But it goes straight and far down the fairway. And people ask me how I do it. And I go, I don't know. And I think because we didn't intrinsically know what could go wrong, we didn't intrinsically know what we should not know.
Mm.
It worked in our favor because ignorance is bliss, and we channeled all that training, all that energy, all that new absorption of knowledge into the narcotic world. We'll learn about auto theft and burglary when we get back to the street at some time. But right now, we're going to focus on cocaine and money laundering.
So, what kind of cases were you mostly involved in when you really got into this? And you were undercover for what, 10 years?
10 years. 10 years.
Okay.
Mostly the majority of it was very high volume money laundering, and then a lot of also large scale cocaine.
Okay. Can you give us an idea of like, okay, large scale cocaine trafficking? Like what were some of the biggest busts that you had?
Well, I think the biggest bust that we had probably occurred within the first 8 or 9 months of us being with Operation Greenback when we seized $26 million in cash.
Wow.
And that actually became, it's kind of hard to say because I come across like the Forrest Gump of law enforcement. Like that money, that money became the seed money that Congress and the DEA were looking for to create HIDTA. So
Okay,
that
sure.
seizure funded the very first HIDTA in Miami, which caused
Oh,
other HIDTAs to be sprung up across the country.
gotcha.
Even though the game plan and the mapping of HIDTA had been pushed through the different areas of the judicial Justice Department and Congress, the funding wasn't there, and now all of a sudden here was the funding. So yeah, 26 million is a very large hit, even in by today's standards. At the time, it was the largest cash seizure in law enforcement history. But
Now, to give us some framework, what year do you remember that? What
yeah,
year that was?
July of 1990.
1990. I wonder what that would be like factoring in inflation and all that. Man.
I don't know. I remember I remember one time we seized it was almost 7 million. It was 6.8 million out of a house. And at the time, the US Treasurer was Nicholas Brady, and he was in the city. He was in Miami that day. So obviously, the higher ups at DEA and US Customs thought this is a great time to show the US Treasurer what we're doing. So next year's budget doesn't have any hits. So they,
Right.
they brought him out to the scene. And I remember standing next to him, and he picked up a big stack of money. And I was like, if you're looking for your signature, it's on some of those somewhere,
Yeah.
Yeah, but he was like, he's seeing all this money and half of it has his signature on it.
Now, we've all seen, Miami Vice and other movies or television series, around that era and that location. In, fancy cars, fancy clothes, all that kind of stuff. You weren't living on a boat dock with a sailboat and a cigarette boat next to it or anything like that, and a pet alligator, I don't think. But did your colleagues or bosses have some jealousy? Maybe you have this much freedom and you're doing, most cops would think, hey, that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, life and art do imitate each other. Miami Vice the TV show was born from many instances and cases and lifestyles of what was going on, truthfully. Of course, it was a highly stylized version of all that. So, in now working as the real actual Miami Vice, there's some of that leaches over into your lifestyle and what you're doing. No, there was not a sailboat, there was not a cigarette boat with an alligator, but we had access to boats. We had access to houses, apartments, and other cars and high-end cars and things. Um, yeah, there was a lot of jealousy at first, and part of it's because many people didn't fully understand what we were doing, and I would venture to say that many of them to this day still don't remember or understand what we were doing back then. In the police academy, you learn, as we mentioned earlier, the elements of burglary. You learn how to make a traffic stop. You learn how to effect an arrest, handcuffing techniques. Nobody teaches you how to be a money launderer or a drug trafficker.
No, they do not.
So we were doing this, and yet we were seizing so much money, which goes into the law enforcement trust fund, the LETF. which allows your agency to now repurpose that currency for other non-budgeted items. Therefore,
Mm.
training amped up, take-home patrol cars amped up, new radio systems amped up. So they saw the trappings of success from it, but they didn't understand how it was doing. And give you an analogy, you may love a steak, but you don't want to see how the cow's butchered. We were the butchers. We
Okay.
had to go out there and get all bloody doing it. You were just happy to get the steak. So the jealousy came from the fact that we were doing things that hadn't been done before, and we are doing it at such an accelerated rate that overnight we were the only people with cell phones. Overnight, we were the only people who had undercover credit cards and were trying and flying to New York or Houston or Los Angeles. And
Mm.
overnight, we were driving very, very high-end cars. And so people didn't really understand that at first. And everything comes with a price. And myself and my partners that were involved in this, we all paid a price for it. It took a toll on all of us and our family and our lives and what we were doing. But, it was part of the nature of what we were doing.
Sure. Now, what was your favorite car that you drove out of all the high end ones?
Well, I had a very, very big Cadillac during at the time that Hurricane Andrew hit.
Okay.
So from a functionality point of view, I love that because when Hurricane Andrew came, we all were sent back in an Alpha Bravo 12-hour shift
Sure.
situation for a couple months. I was with the National Guard, not during the hurricane, but after the hurricane at 2 or 3 a.m., I always had to take a National Guard delegation to a local supermarket. And the manager would load up that big trunk full of water and bread and
Yeah.
staples, and I would drive back to my neighborhood that was devastated and help people. So I liked the fact that that trunk was so big and I could use it altruistically for other things. The cars we switched in and out a lot. I didn't really have a favorite.
Okay.
We had good cars. Yeah.
Okay. Now, what part did you play when you're undercover? Did you play, or did you do all of the above, like buying, selling, etc.?
We did all of the above. Over time, we all kind of fell into a role of in the money laundering sphere. It's mostly about creating relationships with informants, and it's about understanding the flow of the currency of money.
Mm.
So after a while, you're mostly overseeing through, it could be through surveillance, it could be through contacts, it could be through just the work you're doing. You're overseeing multiple flows, multiple channels of currency leaving and coming into the United States. And your goal is to not get yourself or anyone else injured or get your informants injured or hurt or killed. So you're kind of juggling all of that at the same time. That
Sure.
became the primary aspect of it. Like you're dealing with attorneys, you're dealing with judges and stuff like that.
Okay. Now, you were close with Miami PD, you said that previously. How was that relationship with them?
From a street perspective in uniform and also from a detective perspective, the Miami Police Department's awesome. I never had a problem at all with a Miami police officer. They've always been very, to my dealings with the Miami Police Department, every officer, every detective, every component of their police brass has always been exemplary. Just super people.
Now, when you're doing all this, high-end enforcement stuff, what about jurisdiction? Did they like anoint you as a sheriff's deputy or a U.S. Marshal or anything like that? Did they do anything like that?
Yeah, we got cross-sworn with the
It's
multiple agencies.
okay.
I had badges from Broward Sheriff's Office, City of Miami, our own badge, U.S. Customs. We had, we had jurisdiction from the tip of Alaska down to Puerto Rico. We were
Oh,
working
okay.
with a special dispensation agreement with the Justice Department, the DEA.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
because
remember.
I have some friends that went through HIDA, and they had to get deputized for with the
Yeah,
county, with the marshals, etc. So there was no jurisdiction, qualms.
no, and there has to be a level of maturity and understanding with that. Just because you're carrying a Broward Sheriff's Office, a BSO badge, doesn't mean you go up to Fort Lauderdale and cause commotion
Yeah.
and start waving it around.
Right.
This is designed to help facilitate what you're doing. You're not. being asked to go out there and be a full-fledged deputy and pull people over and stuff. This is supposed to liquefy your transition as you go across different jurisdictions and things.
Gotcha. Now, you spent a decade of your career undercover, investigating, large scale cocaine trafficking, high volume money laundering cases. You were married at the time, correct, with kids?
I was, yes.
How big of a strain was that on your home life?
I that's an answer I don't really fully have an answer for.
Okay.
Pardon me to speak in in the roundabout way there, Yogi Berra. But the thing was that, and I've often explained to people, like I was in the center. It's like being in a hurricane. I was in the center where it's calm, and while
Mhm.
all this stuff was swirling around me. So the effect it had on my wife or had on my children, I don't fully understand because I wasn't in their shoes. I wasn't seeing it through their optics.
Mm,
I did do my hardest to not, once we talked about golf earlier, I wasn't playing tennis or golf or doing things that took me away from the family. The job took me away from the family enough, so I tried my hardest to be as engaged and present as I could be when I wasn't working. But I can't tell you how many times a family dinner, an outing was interrupted by a cell phone call that had to walk away from the table and take or something. That was just part of what we were doing. And, I became a professional time thief. You would steal time from work to be with the family. You
sure.
steal time from the family to be at work. You were just this professional time thief.
Gotcha. So, what were some of the best and worst parts about being undercover like this?
I think the best part was that you function in society without having anybody have any predetermined ideas about you. When you wear a uniform and you walk into any business or restaurant,
Sure.
people immediately notice you. They see you and they notice you. And they 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 don't size you up because they want to take you on or fight you, but they size you up just to say, well, he looks too heavy to be a cop. He looks too old to be a cop. He looks too this to be a cop.
Yeah.
So when you're working as a regular person, you walk into a restaurant or something, nobody notices who you are. So you had that you were able to move with an anonymity in society that I enjoyed that part of it. I didn't enjoy being when you're in uniform, you're immediately I don't want to use the word targeted. I'll just say you're immediately identified. And that identification causes people to have whatever preconceived notions they have about law enforcement are immediately projected upon you. They're either very nice, kind of standoffish, whatever it may be. But when you're undercover, nobody knows who you are, so nobody, gives you any aggravation in that respect.
Hmm.
I do remember one time I was in the city and I was driving in or something, and I had the regular portable radio, and some woman had called 911 for the police, and some sort of something was going on in her house. It wasn't a burglary. It might have been a um, very exasperated, suspicious person type situation at her front door or something. And I was like a block away, and I pull up and they jump out, and I'm the first one there, and I said, I'm so and so from the police department. What's going on? And she's like, "You're not a cop." And I'm like, "Ma'am, did you call for the police?" She goes, "Yes." I go, "I'm here. How do you think I just show up? I'm here." You know, it's, but I got a lot of, "You're not a cop. You're not a cop" every time. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. So obviously the worst parts were like you said, you're
Well,
playing with time and all that kind of
there's another instance that happened late at night. Um, a violent domestic call. Once again, I was like a block away. I was driving through the city. I pull up, and one of our officers had pulled up, and he knew me, but the second arriving uniform officer did not know me and saw me out front with the first officer, and he literally grabbed me and pushed me over a car. And the other guy's like, "He's one of us. He's one of us." So we had many people in our agency who had never seen us. They heard about us. They'd seen us on paper, but they hadn't seen myself and my team for a couple of years.
So you are, in the drug world and the money laundering world. Obviously, cartels are interwoven with all of that. And I remember you saying that that cartels actually had instruction manuals for their drug dealers to how to act normal and like blend into society. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, you have to recognize this was very much pre-internet. And so a lot of stuff was more or less, now you can find information on anything you want, even through an email. But back then they had a little um, a manual of sorts. Leave for work every day, come home the same hour, stay away from your house, leave it, don't let the yard get too high, cut the grass, be friendly to the neighbors, but don't be inviting them over and stuff like that.
Sure.
Wave and smile, but don't get too involved. Have a barbecue or an event at your house every couple months, but nothing that's going to draw attention or cause the police, or have too many cars parked on the street that's going to cause the police to come over. All these little tidbits are in that manual. Yeah, we'd seen it.
Yeah, it's amazing to me that, and it doesn't have to be a cartel member, but some drug dealers, they just want the bling. They want the obnoxious car. They want you to see that it's like, I've got all this money. And it's like, and you don't have a job. That's gonna raise some red flags.
Well, it's a psychological victory. We oftentimes don't realize that as a society, we're often very tribal. The police department's very tribal. You
Oh
have your
yeah.
own you have your own language, your own uniform, your own clothing, your own markings, your own dialect, basically between yourselves. And you go to the lawyers, the suit and tie and the briefcase. Everyone's kind of tribal. So in the drug world, the way you can stand out amongst your other drug peers and the way you can stand out amongst society is to show you made it. And oftentimes it's so elementary simple, but yet nobody ever recognizes that that's the first step to your downfall. In fact, I don't know the full case. And there's a story somewhere in New York City where some guy was a big time drug dealer in Harlem, and he went to some boxing match wearing like a full length mink coat. And the cops were like, that guy, you know, and
Yeah.
that was his downfall. And they made a movie of it. I don't know who much about it, but other than that, but yeah, you'd be surprised. We had a case where this guy was moving money through the Netherlands, and we were with him. And he was trying to get to The Hague, and he had sewn a lot of currency. He was moving money through, shipping containers and freight and suitcases, but on this personal body, he liked to carry about, 80, 90,000 if he could. So he'd sewn some money into the hem of his pants, and the stitching had come out. And while he was walking to the airport, money was falling out of his pants, and that's how they caught him. And then they got him before he got to that neutral spot in The Hague, and that unraveled this entire case that took us all the way out to the Pacific Northwest and Reno,
Oh my
Nevada, and
gosh.
everywhere else. Yeah.
That's hilarious. Now, obviously doing undercover work and, making drug dealers angry about, losing product and or money, there's an added layer of danger to your job. And at one point in time, there was a contract out on your life. Could you kind of tell us a little bit about that?
There's one on myself and my partner. It wasn't a large proclamated conversation or a thing. It was just we were just pulled aside one day after that large seizure, and we were told that they were looking for us, and they put out it was an open contract. It wasn't like they had said, anybody, they didn't like target a team to come up from Colombia. They just
Mm,
said, hey, you come across these guys and you take them out, we'll take care of you, type of thing.
yeah, that's unnerving. How did that change you, or did it professionally or personally?
It didn't really change me, and I don't think it changed my partner either. I think we recognized that this was part of what goes on in this world. We're also younger and a lot more just a lot more in tune with our lives and things in a
Yeah.
sense. And it's I don't know if I'm making any sense. What I'm trying to say is that when you're younger, there's a mentality of you're impervious to anything that's going to go wrong, and you have this mindset that you can handle anything. So we just kind of shrugged and moved forward with it. He was a great guy, and I was doing my job. He was a great partner, and we just kind of looked at each other and we're like, okay,
Yeah, well, when you're new or newer, you're 10 feet tall and you're bulletproof.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I
that's how
guess,
you feel at least. Personally, I had a contract out on me from a detective. It
huh,
was myself and like 10 people. He had this death list of
hmm.
people that he wanted to kill, and his girlfriend dropped a dime to internal affairs. And the only thing it did to me was just piss me off. I was at the top of it, and he was making some allegations that never happened. And he's like, well, I'm just going to kill all these guys.
Yeah, I've learned in life that no matter how good you think you are, how good you try to be, you're always at some point you're going to be the villain in somebody's book.
Yep, absolutely.
You're not gonna make everybody happy, and there are gonna be people out there who are not gonna like you, and you're gonna go, man, I know why, because we clashed here. And then there'll be situations where you go, I have no idea. I must have said or done something. And then there's times when you just end up on someone's radar screen for because you were there.
Yeah.
The machinations of someone's mind and what they're thinking, you can't always predict. And I'm sorry you went through that. It's rather unsettling because that person obviously knows the ramifications of killing someone in law enforcement, especially 10 times over.
Yep.
But
But
the people when they get there's we overuse the word sickness, but there's some sort of there's some sort of cognitive dissonance going on in the brain that causes someone to want to create a list. And we had a person in our department who kept a list of every transgression that they thought ever happened to them in their career.
mm,
And the list just grew as they went
sure.
over the years. The list just grew. Nothing ever came of it, and that's just a lot of negative energy that you're spinning in circles over.
I think we all know those people, yes. And like you said, all it does is just eat you up inside and just
Yeah,
yeah,
I
it's
mean,
toxic. It's just toxic.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
just try to be happy. That's how I try to live. But but not too many people can say that they've had a contract out of their life,
Well, there's a
We're
lot of
at
people
the club.
who, yeah, but I mean, i- if this person had never acted on that list and his girlfriend had not come forward, you wouldn't even know it, but the
Yeah,
list would still exist.
yeah, you're right.
So there's people out there who are on the list for somebody and they don't even know it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. So you do this undercover stuff for about 10 years. Then where did you go in the department?
Back to the road. All roads lead to the road. People don't seem to understand that. Either through promotion or through other aspects of your life, all roads lead to the road. And a lot of people are terrified of the road. They think it's not the place to be. Uniform patrol is there's nothing wrong with it. It's the backbone of the agency.
Yes.
I um I didn't slow down. I kept my intelligence channels open. I kept contact with a lot of people I was dealing with before. I had my ear to the ground about a lot of things, and it worked out really well.
So as far as departing from the unit that you were in, how did that play out? Did you want to leave or just things changed and it was just time or how'd that look like?
You know, I didn't want to leave entirely, but I was becoming more and more unhappy with
Mm,
what I was seeing. I was going through some documents yesterday, in fact, about situations involving suicide. And this person wrote, I don't want to die, but I don't want my life to continue the way it is.
mm,
So I didn't want to leave the unit, but I didn't want to continue with it the way it was going. The unit had become very unwieldy, it had become very large. We had gone from having 6 or 7 detectives to having like 65.
wow.
We had multiple layers of now, team leader, group leader, all these different layers that you had to go through for approval to send up your cases and have your cases sent down to you. I was dealing with multiple agencies, multiple personalities, and it just got to the point where it just wasn't, I hate to use the word fun because people say it all the time, it wasn't fun anymore, but it just wasn't as productive.
Okay.
It wasn't as fulfilling and it wasn't as ethical as it was before. And it was
Hmm.
just time to go on. It was just time to leave. And it was difficult at first because I didn't truly understand it. But as time went on, I recognized it was probably a good thing to leave because further on down the line, the unit had lots of problems.
So you get out of that, you're back on the road. Did you feel a little bit like a fish out of water or what'd that look like?
At first you do. It wasn't hard to acclimate back to the road. It was hard to first of all, you're coming back with a tremendous amount of seniority. So, unfortunately, you're knocking people out their great days off because you have
Oh,
seniority. So you're
okay.
knocking them out of seniority. You're you're doing things, you're stepping in. A lot of people didn't even know me. I mean, literally guys would take a traffic stop and I'd back them up and they would look at me like, you know, I'd
Who's this
heard of
guy?
you, but I've never seen you. Yeah, who is this guy? Yeah, exactly. So it was an adjustment, but it worked out fairly well.
Okay, so did you promote to detective while you were doing the undercover stuff or afterwards?
We were, as I
Uh,
said earlier, we were a street crime narcotic unit.
yeah.
And when we got into Vice Intelligence Narcotics, we were automatically made detectives.
Okay. Okay. So you didn't
It's
have to
not
go
like
through
a
like a
promotional like NYPD and those other agencies. There's not really a promotional. It's more of a elevation than a promotion.
okay. Gotcha. So you go back to the street and where did your career take you after that?
Career took me, I was a supervisor in the south end of the city for about 7 or 8 years. And then from there, I had about 5 years to go to retirement and an opening occurred for grant coordinator.
Hmm.
I put in for grant coordinator and I was the grant coordinator for our department, working federal and state and local grants. And then we had a chief at the time who wanted to start an intelligence division. So I was kind of doing intelligence and grants at the same time.
Okay. Now, did you promote to sergeant then, or is that the highest you went?
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Now, with that was like a formal like process, correct? With testing and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Okay. How long were you a sarge?
Well, like I said, a supervisor in the South End for 8 or so years. So I retired
Okay.
as a sergeant. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I still think sergeant was the best job on the best position on the job. I absolutely loved it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Once you find your niche,
Right.
I saw a picture of you online with a canine dog. Um, that would not be me. I would not have been a good, I love dogs, but
Right.
I would not have been a good canine handler. I would not have been a good motorcycle officer. I would not have been a good traffic enforcement guy. That was not my forte.
Yeah.
And I knew what I was good at. And I had people in my agency who oftentimes put in for multiple positions. I stayed in my lane. I didn't try to do things I knew I was not going to be good at.
Yeah, it's funny with the canine, what where that came from. I went day shift after working nights for 17 years. And one of my cops was a canine. She was on late shift with I was her boss on late shift for a few years. And what happens is, she got into the canine unit and she had free reign over the city. But you always go back to roost at the district that you know the best and you're more comfortable with. So she would always come in with her canine to like write reports and do whatever. And she was out and about and she said, "Hey, Sarge." I'm like, "Yeah, hey, meet me over here." And I'm like, "Okay." It was like abandoned warehouses, more or less. And she's like, "I'm training. This is a new dog." She said, "I'm trying to get him his head out of his ass." Yeah. And she's like, "Could you hide for me?" And I'm like, "Sure." I want my dog to do some tracking. So, it was a slow Sunday afternoon. It's like, "Yeah, why not?" So, I wasn't a canine officer. I
Oh,
wasn't in
okay.
charge of the canines, but, she took up my picture with the dog because I helped her like for a couple hours, with
And
training.
did you wear the sleeve?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, holy cow.
I've done that. I've done that too. Yeah.
Talk about pressure. It's the bite sleeve for people who don't know. The amount of pressure that the jaws on those dogs is, I thought it was going to break my arm. And she's just
Yeah.
like, "Hey," she said, "lift them up, do figure eights, do whatever, try to get them off of you." And it's like, he ain't
Yeah.
budging.
In that street crime unit, my sergeant and I both on the same night, um, we had some armed robbers that we were pursuing in the perimeter and independently of each other and at different locations, but inside that same perimeter, we both got bit. I got bit by a Miami Shepherd that that
Oh God.
dragged me on my back about 7 or 8 feet.
Holy cow.
And when they got the dog off me, I had a little oil well of blood popping out, every time pumping out. And
Where did he get you, in the arm or the leg?
it got me just below the knee on the inside of my calf.
Ooh.
And now, like, I don't know if your podcast people want to hear this, but now, like 30 years later, I'm starting to get like a little bluish tint there. Like it's vascularly damaged.
Oh
Yeah.
man. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
lucky it didn't hit your femoral.
Or higher up. Yeah.
Yeah, you'd be singing soprano before you know it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, very, but yeah, yeah, it was painful.
Yeah, that's one another misnomer is that the dogs are amazing tools for law enforcement. I'm a huge proponent, but they're not perfect.
No,
And
no, I
the,
had, yeah, I had taken this guy down and I had his scent all over me. And I ended up working with the canine handler from Miami. We got to a bush and the handler and the dog went one side and I stupidly went the other way. And all the dog saw was my leg come out.
oh, yeah, what happens is what people understand is, you set up the perimeter, and usually it's like some kind of like a car chase or a foot chase or whatever, and inevitably it winds up being a foot chase. And it's like, okay, cops stand still while the dog and the handler make these yards.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many times, it's like squirrel, it's like, oh
Yeah.
yeah,
High alert. They're on high
yeah,
alert.
yeah, but the thing about it is that you have these cops that's like, okay, we're trained to stand still. If okay, we know the canine is there, they're tracking somebody, blah blah. If they start running, don't go running after them. Have the canine run after them.
Yeah.
It's because what's going to happen? The canine's going to chase you and bite you.
Yeah. I don't blame the handler. I don't blame the dog. It's my
Right.
own stupidity. I was working with him where, it wasn't like we've been walking together now, the three of us, the two of us and the dog for like a block. And then,
Yeah.
the dog lost sight of me. And all he saw was my leg come out of the other side of the bush. So
Yeah. I've seen them in action with bad guys before, and just real quick, badass gangster, all tatted up, blah blah blah. It was like a scene out of a movie. Our Vice people were chasing somebody, and they wind up in a neighborhood barbecue filled with gangsters. So he's just like, I need some help, like right now. So everyone goes screaming over there. They get the guy in handcuffs. He's wanted for X, Y, and Z. He, like I said, he's all tatted up. He doesn't have a shirt on. He's a badass. He's running off, from the mouth. Blah blah blah. So I'm helping another cop get him to the wagon, and the canine comes, and he just will not shut up. So I look at the handler. It's the same officer. I'm like, just make him bark and show his teeth. Maybe that'll calm down. She said, yeah, sure, no problem. So she does, and he tries to kick the dog. And I'm like, that dog was on him like that. He chomped down on his stomach. So you have
mm,
this badass gangster that's, MFing everybody, I'm this, I'm that, yada yada, crying like a 2-year old. So,
I would too.
yeah. So, but the dog did not, barely broke the skin,
Mm.
barely. And, I had to go to the hospital to see, obviously his next stop was the hospital. And I'm like, why on earth would you pick a fight with that dog? Do you have any idea? They could chew off like tree branches, for God's sakes. You are so stupid. But
Yeah.
hey, most
What can I
criminals
tell
aren't.
you?
They're not brainiacs, that's for sure. But
Well, I mean,
anyways,
we always joke that the reason why you have organized crime is because you have disorganized law enforcement. There's a depletion of intelligence, I think, on both sides of the fence sometimes.
yeah, you're right about that. So when you were working, you consulted on some serial offender homicide cases. Can you tell us about those?
I did. We had a situation in the Gables where we felt we had a serial murder had come through our city.
Ooh.
And the case kind of fell into my lap and I started working it. And one of the Miami-Dade homicide detectives who had been involved in the case from its inception had transferred into narcotics. He was now on my undercover team. So we were now working together in narcotics. So we were able to talk about this case and work on this case a little bit. And then I started to work very closely with a forensic psychologist from Vermont
Mm.
named Dr. John Philpin. And Dr. John Philpin became a very close friend and mentor. And I felt like I was developing an aptitude for understanding how these cases progress and the typology of these offender personalities. So I went back to school. I got my master's degree in investigative criminal
Oh,
psychology.
okay.
I got accepted for a doctorate in the UK under Dr. David Cantor, and I was able to consult, converse with some of the better thinkers in the field, and of course with Dr. John Philpin as well. And that's how that happened. So then the agency we had a serial killer in Miami who was killing prostitutes,
Mm.
and it was just before the Super Bowl. And on the third victim, he started writing messages on the bodies,
Oh,
and
wow.
so the Gables sent me to that task force, and from there, I did the profile on that case, and we had a successful resolve and arrest on that case. And I felt that I needed to build some credibility. So, like I said, I got my degree.
Yeah.
And sometimes the Gables would send me to the city of Miami or Miami-Dade when they needed some help with something. And cops are very territorial.
Oh, yeah.
They don't want an outsider coming in
Sure.
and you're telling them, asking them, showing them something they didn't think of themselves. So the academic background helped with credibility. So
Now, the serial killer in Miami that was killing prostitutes, what was his story?
he was every killer seemed to get some sort of crazy name, and his name was a Tamiami Strangler because he was killing
Okay.
the women. Actually, one was a male dressed like a woman. He was killing the prostitutes by strangling them, and he was leaving the bodies off of Main Avenue in Miami-Dade County called the Tamiami Trail. So
Yeah. Yep.
he was called the Tamiami Strangler, and his name was Rory Condé. He was a young man who had some issues with women. And once again, I did like a 36 point criminal profile on him, and he had exact on like 34 of those points exact. And then I also did a geo profile on the body disposal sites, and we worked on victimology, victim target network, victim target assessment. A lot of correlation of that came together in that case.
So, what was his demise? How did you guys catch him?
His demise was he was caught the way the profiles say we get caught. He got careless. Um, he encountered a young woman, and I suspect was in that trade. I don't know for sure because she's alive. He encountered this woman, and rather than kill her, he kept her bound while he actually went to court on a traffic ticket case. And while he was in court, she was able to free herself and get help. And
Oh,
the profiles basically said that he would get careless, and that's how he was going to get caught. And that's exactly what happened.
wow. That's, but looking at the guy, would you think, hey, this is a serial killer?
You know,
There really
Hollywood,
isn't a look anymore, right?
yeah, Hollywood and TV oftentimes portrayed serial killers in a certain light because it's easier to tell the story to the audience in a quick
Sure.
fashion. You know, it's a 45-minute TV show. It's a 1.5 hour long movie. You have to establish these thresholds early. But yeah, they could look like anybody. He was kind of diminutive in stature and kind of regular looking.
Darn. So, retirement from law enforcement. Yeah. How many years did you do?
27.
So, 27. What was the reason for retirement, or was it just time, or was there another opportunity, or what did that look like?
It was time. It was a
Okay.
natural, just natural gestation of time. It was time to go.
Okay.
You know, traditionally the department had a 25-year retirement and then it
Mhm.
just got extended a little bit, but I left at 27 years.
Okay. What do you miss the most?
Um, I don't know if I miss a lot of it. There were some very good people there, very wonderful people. People were nice. I thought that the working environment was nice. People complained about it on a daily basis because that's part of the lexicon of law enforcement.
Yes, it is.
If you're not complaining, you're not happy. But
Yeah.
it, you know, from a visual geographical sense, the city of Coral Gables is a wonderful city to work in. You know, it was, I don't know if I miss anything so much as I recognized and I'm grateful and I'm appreciative of all the good times, but I also recognize those time to go and you move on.
Gotcha. Now, you worked in television and movies as a advisor. How many shows have you been on?
Um, to date so far, I've done 2 movies and 2 shows.
Cool. Can you say which ones, or are there NDAs?
No. I worked on a NBC Universal show called Gone, Gone. It's
Hmm.
about an FBI task force that looks for missing people. Very good cast, very good writers, good producer, good creator, all great people. We actually filmed the entire series in Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh filled in for Sacramento, it filled in for Green Bay, it filled in for Rhode Island. The city backdrop could play almost anywhere.
Sure.
It's a good experience, really top-notch people, good plot lines, good storylines. It did quite well in Australia, did quite well in Europe, did decently in the United States, and it ended up, it's still out there. It's on, I think it's on WGN
Okay.
is carrying it right now. And you can also get it on Amazon.
Yeah.
And then I worked on a series called The 11 for A&E about a serial murderer in Texas.
Mm.
Uh,
Now, did you ever get in front of the camera? Did they put you in there as an extra or anything like that?
It's funny because the one of the directors on Gone has said to me on set, he goes, they flew in a guy from Cleveland to do a role. And he said, if I'd known you were going to be here, I would have just used you. And I was like, it's no big deal. No, I never got in front of the camera, which is fine. I mean, yeah, that's
Yeah.
not what I was there for.
Sure, sure. Now, how did you stumble upon that? How did they pluck you into that, or did you pitch yourself, or how'd
No,
that work?
I was working on a movie in Cornwall, New York, and the other advisor on that movie was a real good guy and a good friend,
Mm,
and he's based in New York, and he is a technical advisor for many of the TV shows you like to watch now, and
okay.
he's very, very busy. And he just said, "Listen, they need me in Pittsburgh. I just can't do it. Can you do it for me?"
Okay.
So yeah, I stepped in, and that's where it took off from there.
Very cool. Well, let's change channels here and go to your author career. How did that start?
It started. The, the first book I wrote is a novel called Trust No One, and it had been germinating in my head for quite a long time. And I started dating my wife now, and she was a very big executive, and she was very busy. And I would see her in the morning, and she would go off to her office, and I would say, "So, what does your day look like?" And she'd go, "Oh, I've got back to back to back to back stuff. I've got 320 emails I need to catch up on." And she's like, "And what are you gonna do?" And I was like, "I'm probably gonna ride my bike over the bridge." And I figured out I need to do something, and the story had been germinating in my head. So I wrote the first novel, which is called Trust No One, and it's about a fictional vice narcotic detective named Cade Taylor. I think many people wanted me to write. I heard frequently people to ask me to, "You should write a book. You should write a book." And I
Sure.
think they wanted some sort of tell-all or some sort of insight of a real life story. And I didn't want to go that route. So I created a fictional character named Cade Taylor, and he's a detective in Miami, and he's in the vice narcotics unit. And once again, you write what you know. And that's
Sure.
what I was trying to accomplish here. And I thought that Trust No One would be just one and done. I'd satisfy that urge, I'd satisfy that burn. And I didn't think that it would fall into as many hands as it did. And started getting a lot of feedback.
Okay.
People wanted more Cade Taylor. And I didn't think I had another Cade Taylor in me, but after some contemplation, I wrote the second novel, which is called Grasp and Smoke. And once again, Cade Taylor returns in that book. And people ask me, "Well, what is grasp and smoke?" And grasp and smoke is a term we often use in criminal profiling for when you can see something, but you can't get your hands around it. You just
Mm,
can't, you can't, you can't pull it in. It's like it's as difficult as grasp and smoke. So Cade Taylor in this book is vexed with a case that he can kind of understand it, but there's parts of it he just doesn't get, and it's very difficult for him. So that's where that title came from.
okay.
That became One More Move, the third book, and then the fourth book, which came out last month, is Choices and Chances. All of them are
Excellent.
Cade Taylor books. Yeah.
Okay. Now, are you traditionally published or are you self-published?
I'm traditionally published as a small multimedia company called Biate Bellicosi.
Hmm.
But I would venture to say they are more on the small side than traditional mainstream publishers. The publishing world is very it's fraught. It's fraught with lots of ups and downs,
Oh, sure
and
is. Yes.
very few people rise to the top. It's very hard.
Yeah, like we were talking off camera, it's you feel like you're pushing a boulder up a mountain.
Yeah.
And it's like it can either roll over you, or hopefully you make it to the top and then you roll down, and then it's all about momentum. If you have some decent momentum going, boy, that
Well,
helps a lot.
if you hit that niche too, I mean, all it takes for anybody, and it can be anybody, is to have the right person or the right entity hold your book up and go, I love this.
Yep,
And it would take off.
you're absolutely
Um,
right.
there's talented people out there who are published. There are talented people who out there who are self-published. There's talented people who fall into that hybrid, but it's still an art form. And whether a million people read your book or one person read your books, if it brings enjoyment to that person, then it's a win, you know.
Right. So your latest book, Choices and Chances, it's a Cade Taylor novel, like you said before. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And it just recently came out, like last month, like you said, right?
Yeah, the release date was February 9th. Yeah, Choices and Chances. It's the fourth book in this series. All four books take place over the matter of 1 year. All four books are standalones. If you read
Mm,
them out of order, you'll be okay. But
okay.
if you read them in order, it's just a little bit easier because everything transitions. You'll see there's a bit of an evolution in the character and a bit of evolution in the story arc. But all four of them, if you read one out of order, you will not have a spoiler that ruins it for all the other three. Um, Similar situation, Cade Taylor's and is involved in a cocaine situation in Miami, and there's some murder and some mayhem that ensue.
Excellent. Very good. Well, I think that's a good place for us to finish here. What's next for you and your books?
That's a good question. I don't know. I would like to think like it's forward trajectory and that things are going positively in one direction, but you just don't know. I've started dabbling in two different other book premises that are unrelated to Cade,
Mhm.
but yet still at night sometimes Cade knocks on the interior of my skull and he says, "Hey,
Let me out.
you thought you were done at one, and then we did two, and three, and four. I think we can do five." So if I can come together with a good, compelling story and make it something the readers would enjoy, I could see myself doing another Cade Taylor. But right now, I'm working on a story about a guy in Los Angeles.
All right, very good. Where can people find more about you and your books? Do you have a website?
I do. It's michaelhearns.com. And there's an author page on Facebook, author Michael Hearns. Um, the books are available anywhere you buy books, any store, any independent bookstore, any major chain, Amazon, Apple, all those things. There's an e-version of all books. Um, the books are available through any bookstore you want to go to.
Excellent. Well, thanks again for being on the show today, Mike.
Well, I enjoyed being here. Thank you. Thank you for having me.